Hello. Today we're going to talk about something that needs to be discussed in forestry and forest management anywhere in the world, and that's spatial heterogeneity, and just discuss riparian zones and edges. The key focus in this talk will be spatial heterogeneity, and I'll explain that oversized word shortly. So, the objective of this lecture is to define that long word and to discuss how forest is viewed by wildlife at different scales, and what is a habitat generalist and what is a habitat specialist, and then how do you graph spatial heterogeneity, and so you know, are you doing a good job or a bad job in regards to taking care of wildlife. So I guess let's get right into it. So first of all, the spatial heterogeneity is defined as a variety of spaces. That's really what that means. That's what that word means. And if you look at this diagram here, you can see that if you assume that the black areas is where there's forest, or you could flip it the other way, but let's say assume the black areas are forest and the white areas are not. Here you have a variety of spaces. This is just theoretical, but this here you can see there's these larger ones, and then there's fewer, but there's many more smaller ones, right down to almost little dots. This is spatial heterogeneity. And so with us, when we respect to forestry types, we have to respect why do we even care about that? Well, spatial heterogeneity really impacts where things live. And the big question is how much area does an organism, anything living, require to live? And there is no one pat answer for this, because a tree, since I've never seen them move unless you saw the movie Lord of the Rings and saw the Ents, but besides that, the trees are pretty stationary, and they need 2 to 4 meters squared of area to live. A spider, okay, and this could be a wolf spider, could be up to 10 meters squared as its whole life, its whole area where it lives. A wolf pack could be 40,000 hectares if it's ranging in Algonquin Park all over the area, all over the place. And spotted owls also out west are known to have, each pair of spotted owls need about 6,000 hectares of land. So depending on the organism that you're trying to manage for, the variety of space is dramatically different between different species. So therefore, a forest that is going to support a diversity of wildlife must be spatially diverse. And this is from an excellent book. It came out in the early 80s. It's called Wildlife, Forests, and Forestry. And Hunter wrote it. And this guy, if you ever want a great book to read, this is it. I have it on reference in the library, I believe, yeah. And it's just one of those good books to read. It's very readable, and it's just, it's excellent. Oops, I went a little too fast. Here we go. So, do all species view the forest the same way in regards to spatial heterogeneity? And the answer is certainly no. A warbler, and this is a picture of a warbler, by the way, in case you're wondering what the warbler looks like if you're not a birder. A warbler has a small home range of about 4 hectares. So if you looked at this theoretical ground, let's pretend each one of these little blocks here is 4 hectares. Again, this is, in nature it's a lot more varied, but theoretically, let's say it's checkerboard like this. Great. The warbler would find a happy home in any of these patches in here. Okay? A kestrel, which of course is this bird here, needs a large home range of 400 hectares. So a warbler is able to find suitable patches of mature forest in here, while a kestrel, the entire area is unsuitable for its hunting and for habitat. So therefore, even though we've done good forestry here maybe, and it's very sustainable, and we've kept and we've taken care of warblers, we haven't addressed the wildlife issues in respect to other species. And this is just touching 2 species. As you know from your wildlife habitat suitability matrix work you're doing in our course for Challenge 4, this can be an issue. So that was the one example, was that the wildlife in this example, the whole issue was in regards to amount of space. Then there's different types of wildlife out there, and we have 2 types of wildlife out there, and the 2 types are habitat specialists, and this would be like a woodcock. This is a picture of a woodcock, and let's just look at the spotted owls. What they need is continuous forests. Oops, there's a typo. They need continuous forests and of old growth out west, and that's why all the challenges are occurring in regards to harvesting and spotted owls. The woodcock, on the other hand, needs habitat, but what it needs at the same time in the same location needs forest openings, it needs alder swamps, and it needs 15 to 30-year-old hardwood stands. So it needs places to feed and for raising its young, and then just for protection. So this is a very specialized requirement. So you can't, when you're dealing with this species, if it's recognized in the area, you have to address these issues. Now that's for, and you know, another habitat specialist could be red-shouldered hawk and so on. Okay. Now the other type of species we have out there is called a habitat generalist. And if you look in that wildlife suitability book and you look for coyote, skunk, raccoon, like this wily guy here, you'll see they all can live, they use every kind of location. Raccoons, white-tailed deer, coyotes are found in a variety of forests. They are not exclusive, so really we don't need to manage for them at all. It is very easy for them. They just find the right habitat, especially backyards. So the 2 conclusions we can state from all this is that the diversity of a forest depends on the scale which is viewed by the species that use it, and that some species have very particular habitat requirements, while others it just doesn't matter. So how do we in forestry influence this habitat? And that's what we're going to talk about now. But the way to do that is, first let's see what happens in nature. And in nature, if you look at soils, topography, and the flow of water, it seems to be that there's a great variety, but how much is there of each one? That's what we want to look at. And the biggest thing, and we've told, I've already discussed about this, is disturbances is a big deal. That's how we create this spatial variety. And so what happens? We can have one tree falling in the bush causing a small change, and we can have a vast fire creating a vast change. Okay? So generally, if you take either one of these and you average it over 200 years, what they found was that you get about 1% change every year over 200 years. Okay? Now that could be 1% every year, or that's if you average it, or one big disturbance every 50 to 200 years, burning the place down, or a big windstorm. But generally, if you average it, it would be around 1% change each year. So, and then we have, shade-tolerant forests. They have minor disturbances, like our maple, oak type of forest, versus our shade-intolerant forest, jack pine, poplar, birch. They have large disturbances, which occur infrequently, like fires. So how do we influence spatial how do we manage it? Because we want to imitate nature. That's the goal. That's the number one goal. Emulate is the word. We want to imitate nature such that we can maintain that good dynamics of for wildlife out there. So what we do is we harvest different ways. We do selection harvesting, where we take a tree out here and there. We do patch cuts, which are up to 2 hectares, and then we do large clear cuts. Now, large clear cuts have got a bad name, and I'm not here to promote large clear cuts, but a neat thing to remember is that a large clear cut now becomes in the future tomorrow's large uniform forest habitat. So there are advantages to these larger clear cuts as far as habitat goes. So this makes it all very interesting and a great variety. So the big question that's out there is, how much forest would be harvested, how much forest should be harvested at the small to large scale to ensure maximum diversity. So you consider what's found in nature. We have one St. Lawrence, and we have millions of small streams. There's several hundred species of mice and only 7 species of bears out there. Many small fires, and then a few huge ones that everyone hears about, and many small stands of trees and a few larger ones. Large stands of trees are not that common, surprisingly. So, in a nutshell here, what you see here is that theoretically, if you look at the number of stands, is that, let's take a look at the axis. This is the number of stands out there, and this is how many stands of trees are 1 hectare in size, 10 hectares in size, and you can see that 1,000 hectare stand is quite rare. So we have many small stands and progressively fewer stands which are very large. So we call this an inverse J curve. Okay, inverse J curve, and that's what this line represents, and that is what we're trying to emulate in nature. That's the theory behind good forest management for wildlife. So how big should clear cuts be? I think we've already answered that question. This is in the media, people say, well, how big clear cuts should be, a certain size. And the bigger the area of the forest you're managing on a sustainable basis, the more is the odds of finding a big lake, a big stream, big animals, big fires. So therefore we could have also some big clear cuts in those bigger forests. Okay? That doesn't mean we're just doing big clear cuts. So the current forestry practices, unfortunately in the past, was more almost the other way around, where they were large square things, and you can see out west they didn't look very good, and they were truly minimal spatial heterogeneity, big square blocks, and they literally had the J curve going the other direction. In other words, there was large clear cuts and very few smaller ones. This was exactly the opposite of what is in nature, and of course there was large uproar about that, and it's not good forestry. So the challenge is nowadays is how to ensure maximum diversity is we have to look at, again, clear cut emulating disturbance pattern, and there's actually a book in Ontario, and you'll be getting it soon. This is what these documents are from, that these images are from, that which talk about spatial heterogeneity, and the whole objective again is to try to work better our forests like this. Now let's be realistic. Are we going to cut forests 0.1 hectare in the boreal forest? Never. But we certainly should have more 10 hectare and forest than exclusively 100 hectare forest harvest areas. And if you note here, look at the interesting edge effect, islands, and making it more conducive for wildlife. This image shows exactly the same area. I'll just go up one. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, let's try that again. So this area here that's shown is exactly the same. Is exactly the same area as shown here, but now you can see all the trees left in there, for wildlife, the Chicos, the veterans. So it's very sophisticated these days, and clear cut, you walk through them at camp, are not really clear cut anymore. They are incredibly complex. GPSs are now a wonder tool to make these incredibly complex edges, and certainly have improved. So in the media, the question always, which one is right? Are clear cuts the way to go, or selection cuts? Right? This is always the battle you hear in the media. And clear cuts, they're not expensive, but they do have a negative visual impact. They do imitate fire, and they provide larger section of uniform forest. So this is kind of what the graph looks like. All the cuts are more down here. Then people say, no, let's go selection, but it is more expensive, visually positive, and small disturbances. Right? And so all the cuts should be here. So then you get this crazy battle, and you know what? Both groups are wrong, and I think you already have gathered that. So just what happens is that to meet the demands of people wanting larger harvest areas and people wanting small cuts, a compromise is reached, a medium-sized clear cut. Is this a solution? And the big fat answer is no. That is not the answer in forestry. Maybe in politics, but not in forestry. We need a forest managed at a variety of scales to best imitate natural forests. Otherwise, some species will not have appropriate habitat. So we cannot use a compromise approach in forestry. So what do we need? We need spatial variety, in other words, spatial heterogeneity. So if you look at this very theoretical diagram, again from book of Hunter's book, this was the old style of cutting. It could be like this. I did this out west where we would cut 50% of a watershed, and we were quite proud we left 50% undisturbed until the other side reached free to grow, and then we would approach that. You know, it could be funny little cuts like this, and you know, these look like little rabbits, and who knows what these. This one looks like a rabbit here, especially. Anyways, now what we want is the bottom one, where we have the black is the forest, and the cuts could be, there's a variety of forests there, of different sized blocks. They don't have to be perfectly, you know, the next one's 1 hectare, next one's 2 hectare, but a variety to encourage wildlife. So that's the goal. This is pretty tough to read, but this is just a section. What I wanted to just point out in this is that, and this is a manual we'll provide for you to look at, but the whole idea is that in Ontario we have planned clear cuts, and their size is very much governed by many factors, and we'll talk about that next semester in silviculture. So it's planned. You don't just go out and make a big clear cut. So clear cuts in the past, this is a horrible picture, but the old style, oh, wrong, I didn't want that one, I wanted this one. In the old days, a clear cut was a nice square edges, you know, great for compass work, and all the trees were all clear cut. It was mowed down, and it made sense back then, because it was the idea is to regenerate the forest, have minimal competition. Today's forest clear cuts are very complex, and a lot of times you can't even tell where it starts and where the forest ends. So it's very complex. So what are we doing different now? We're leaving standing Chicos. Okay, we're leaving live trees in the cut block. We make certain that there's down woody debris to create hummock and hollow. We create internal and peninsular residual, meaning so it isn't squared off. In other words, what you do, instead of this square edge here, what you would do is literally have a piece of uncut forest like this, and then maybe another piece here, so that the escape route for an animal across the block isn't so far, and it encourages more wildlife. And then we certainly also want to encourage advanced regeneration along the way. So it's a lot more complex, and I think for you guys a lot more fun when you're doing forestry when you see this kind of approach. This is just to give you a quick overview. Can you see how, and in this case, see how there's islands of trees left right here, and these islands are basically escape areas, so that if animals have to cross this area, there's protection. And then, first of all, you may want to just to backtrack. Why are they made like this? The whole idea is to imitate fire, folks. And a lot of these are from the boreal forest, is to imitate fire. And fire, they've studied many natural fires and discovered the natural patterns, and now they're trying to imitate those patterns. And this we will do next semester extensively in silviculture. So here, just to talk about how do they know how much to leave as an island and how much to leave as a as little peninsulars, right? In other words, things that jut into the cut block. Well, they've studied, for example, if you have a fire in any spruce, jack pine, or balsam fir, they found the islands left are about 2% of the total area, okay, and the pieces that jut into the area is about 8%. Meanwhile, tolerant hardwoods, which are harder to burn, if there's a fire there, 8% is left is in islands, and 28% is jutting out as peninsulars into that harvest area. You guys will design next semester in silviculture a cut block using these concepts up in the city of Kawartha Lakes Forest in January. You'll be marching around and you'll have designed an actual cut block in a red pine and using your GPS skills. Alright, so that gives you a good introduction to spatial heterogeneity.